Hi guys, it's another quick handy video to show how to replace an infill in a toilet. They're all quite similar, and I'm sure some of these skills can be applied to various different models. So let me show you what we're working with at the moment. So here on my little elbow joint leading into the toilet, I've got quite a difficult leak. I have in actual fact taken this apart and inserted a new fibre washer in case that was just the issue. Sometimes they wear thin. As you can see, it's not remedied the problem, so I'm going to replace it with a new infill. So these are some of the tools that we will be using to complete the job. It's the flathead screwdriver to isolate the water, a couple of different size spanners because you never just know, water pump, wrench, and some of this stuff. This essentially is PTFE tape, almost a bit thicker than dental floss, but it also has plumber's putty inside of it, so it's a much better seal and will last an awful lot longer. But normal PTFE tape will also suffice, and then of course the part I'm going to replace it with. So here I'm replacing the plastic screw fit with nickel. I strongly recommend either nickel or copper because the threads will last an awful lot longer, and very often I find that the plastic ones here end up with a little bit of a crack down where the seals are made. So it's up to you, but I think it's worth spending the extra little bit of money to do that for longevity of the equipment. First thing of course is I'm going to need to isolate the water, otherwise I'm just going to get very wet knees and waste an awful lot of water. So we're going to find the isolation valve, which some of my other videos you may have seen it shows, but I'll show you again just real quick. So these are isolation valves. As you can see, where that little screw head points in the same line as the pipes, that means water can flow through it. What we're going to do is take a flathead screwdriver, I'm going to bob that in there and turn it so it's opposite to that. So it's now at 90 degrees to the pipe. You may be thinking, how do I know which one it is? Well listen, if you're not sure, like for example in this particular service cupboard, I've got 2, 3, 4, 5 different isolation valves. Now obviously I'm able to trace these, but in a home you might find that a little bit more of a challenge. Maybe they run a little bit further. Little tip: flush the toilet, turn one of them off, nip back to the toilet and see whether it's still filling or not. If not, keep repeating that process until you find the actual isolation valve that connects to the toilet that you're trying to repair. Okay, now we've isolated the water, the next thing we need to do is empty the tank. So nice and easy, press and hold this so all the water drains out, and you'll notice that you can't hear it filling any longer. To remove this top, we're going to have to take the push button out. Just simply unscrew that, put that somewhere safe, and lift the lid. Okay, you notice there's still a little bit of water in the bottom, and just remember that when we come to take out the extra part, because that will come flowing out. So of course it's this part that we're going to replace. I'm going to start by removing the part closest to the cistern. It's your choice really which way you want to do that. So I'm going to use my boiler wrench and loosen that off until it's loose enough for me to take the rest by hand. There we go. And of course, like I say, expect a little water to come out. As long as you've isolated it, shouldn't be a problem. It's not an awful lot of water. Okay, let's release a bit of the water now. And then we're going to undo the elbow joint. Now this part's loose, so I can continue undoing this part, and with my left hand I'm actually just lifting the unit on the inside to help take it out. And there we have it. So in here, you'll notice there's this little red washer. Now these are actually made of fibre and they can actually wear quite thin over time. I have replaced this one, so I know this one's new. But if you take it out to have a little look, sometimes you'll see little nicks in them. If so, then replace them. Usually these new systems come with them in the packaging. Just to save a little bit of effort, once I have actually installed this unit, I'm just going to set them to the same height as it was before. So this obviously controls how much water can be allowed in the system. So I'm just going to do that by turning this here. Okay, now that it's set to the right height, I'm going to add the internal washer. So you can see it's got a slightly different shape. The idea is that this smaller ring will fill the hole and this outer ring will seal it. So you're just going to pop it on there and push it until it gets to the top. Okay, nice and simple. Now at this stage you might be tempted to put your sealant onto the pipe so it's ready, so you're not fiddling while it's behind the toilet. However, I would avoid doing so because remember you need to put this locking nut on over the top and this seal will stop that from happening. So we're going to put this into the system, lock it into place, and then put my PTFE on and then put it to the elbow inlet water supply. So we take the unit, pretty much only will fit one way depending on the size of your system. Give it a good push down. As you're screwing from the underside, might be an idea to keep your hand on top of this unit because it will obviously attempt to turn as you tighten the locking nut. Now go as tight as you can get, finger tight, making sure of course that these are lining up at the bottom. You may have to just make a few little adjustments, and then we're going to add some PTFE around here. Okay, now as you do this, just be careful that none of these strands end up between the washer and your element, okay? Otherwise that's going to leave a little gap and inevitably you're going to get a leak from there, okay? So if it needs it, leave the threads hanging out and then quite simply turn your nut to the element and tighten it up with a spanner or a plumber's wrench. Okay, so tightened both of these up relatively tight, so now it's time to reinstate the water. So back to our isolation valve. We remember which one we turned off. Of course, it's the one that's going opposite to the pipe, because that's how it's going to stop the flow. I'm going to turn it on. Now, little tip, don't fully turn it on. That pressure could damage some plumbing that you've just done. Also, if you do have a leak and it's not quite tight enough, you're going to have less water damage elsewhere. So I can hear the water just creeping through now, so I'm going to leave it just in that as we go and inspect. Okay, I can see that there's water going into the cistern. I'm going to take a little bit of paper towel. I'm going to make sure it's all completely dry. There will be residue, of course, from when we disconnected it. And this way, if it becomes wet again, we know there's a problem. So I'm going to take a fresh piece. Now, it sounds crazy, but I prefer to use blue roll, just because you can see the water droplets on it far easier than white paper or tissue. But any will do, really. Okay, now what I'm doing is I'm going around edges, seeing whether I'm finding any damp spots on my paper towel. I'm trying to identify where that could be coming from, if there is any. Now, this has never happened before, but in actual fact, there is none. Of course, if there were, then you would have to isolate the water again and just tighten up. Oh, actually, there's a little tiny spot there, and that came from the top at the back. Just double check that wasn't wet from before. Now, drying it off, getting a fresh towel and trying again. Yeah, there's a tiny little bit there. So I'm just going to tighten this locking thread a little bit more.